In the shadowed corridors of power, where ambition meets reality and dreams are either forged into steel or shattered like glass, there exists a particular breed of individual who moves through the world with calculated precision. He is neither the loudest voice in the room nor the most obvious presence, yet his influence permeates every decision, every outcome, every shift in the delicate balance of forces that govern human affairs. This is the dangerous man, not dangerous in the crude sense of physical threat or reckless aggression, but dangerous in his complete mastery of himself and his environment. The dangerous man understands what Niccolò Machiavelli knew centuries ago, that in a world governed by appearances and driven by weakness, the individual who has conquered his own frailties and learned to operate with systematic precision holds an insurmountable advantage. He moves through life like a chess grandmaster, seeing not just the immediate move but the entire sequence that will lead to victory. His power lies not in what he displays but in what he conceals, not in what he says but in what he chooses not to say, not in his reactions but in his deliberate actions. The foundation of this power rests on a trinity of principles that, when mastered and internalized, create an individual whom external forces cannot touch: silence, strategy, and precision. These are not mere tactical choices but fundamental alterations to one's very being, a complete reconstruction of the self that eliminates weakness and creates invulnerability. Consider the man who speaks constantly, who feels compelled to fill every pause with words, to share every thought, to broadcast every intention. He reveals his hand before the game begins, shows his emotions before he's processed them, and broadcasts his plans before he's secured his position. In contrast, the dangerous man has learned that silence is not the absence of communication but the most potent form of it. When he speaks, his words carry weight precisely because they are rare. When he acts, his actions resonate precisely because they are deliberate. When he reveals himself, the revelation has impact precisely because it is strategic. But silence without strategy is merely muteness, and strategy without precision is merely fantasy. The dangerous man operates at the intersection of all three principles, creating a synthesis that transforms him into something more than the sum of his parts. He becomes a force of nature, predictable only in his unpredictability, controllable only in his absolute self-control. The journey toward this transformation is neither quick nor comfortable. It requires a man to examine every aspect of himself with brutal honesty, to identify and systematically eliminate every weakness, every vulnerability, every point of leverage that others might use against him. It demands the destruction of the weak self, that collection of impulses, fears, desires, and habits that make a man predictable and, therefore, controllable. Only when this weak self has been completely dismantled can the dangerous man emerge, forged in the crucible of self-discipline and tempered by the constant application of strategic thinking. This is not a path for the faint-hearted or the self-deluded. It requires acknowledging uncomfortable truths about human nature, about the reality of power dynamics, about the necessity of sometimes choosing effectiveness over likability, results over appearances, long-term positioning over short-term comfort. The dangerous man accepts that the world operates according to certain immutable laws, and, rather than raging against these laws or pretending they don't exist, he learns to use them as tools for his own advancement and protection. In the first movement of this transformation, the dangerous man masters the art of strategic silence, understanding when to speak and when to remain quiet, learning to use silence as both shield and sword. He discovers that in a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, the man who listens holds tremendous power. Information flows to him because others fill the void his silence creates. Secrets are revealed because people mistake his quiet attention for agreement or understanding. Opportunities present themselves because he is not so busy talking that he fails to see them. The second movement involves the development of strategic thinking as a fundamental operating system rather than an occasional tool. The dangerous man learns to see every interaction, every decision, every situation through the lens of long-term consequences and strategic positioning. He asks not, "What do I want?" but "What do I need?" Not, "How do I feel?" but "How should I act?" Not, "What would be satisfying?" but "What would be effective?" This strategic mindset becomes so deeply ingrained that it operates automatically, transforming him into someone who naturally gravitates toward advantageous positions and away from vulnerabilities. The third movement is the cultivation of precision in thought, word, and action. The dangerous man eliminates waste from his life: wasted words, wasted emotions, wasted energy, wasted time. Every action serves a purpose, every word advances an objective, every decision moves him closer to his goals. This precision is not cold calculation but refined efficiency, like a master craftsman who has so thoroughly learned his trade that excellence appears effortless. Throughout history, those who have wielded lasting power and influence have embodied these principles, whether consciously or instinctively. They have understood that true strength comes not from flexing one's muscles but from knowing exactly when and how to apply force. They have recognized that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who threatens loudly but the one who moves quietly and strikes precisely when the moment is right. The dangerous man of today faces challenges that Machiavelli could never have imagined: a world of instant communication where every word can be recorded, analyzed, and weaponized, a society that demands constant transparency yet rewards those who maintain strategic opacity, an environment where information moves at light speed but wisdom still requires time to develop. Yet the fundamental principles remain unchanged because they are rooted in permanent aspects of human nature and the dynamics of power. In this modern landscape, the dangerous man must be more sophisticated than ever before. He must master not only the traditional arts of influence and positioning but also the new realities of digital warfare, psychological manipulation through media, and the complex web of global interconnectedness that can make a local action have worldwide consequences. He must understand how to operate in a world where privacy is scarce but secrecy is more valuable than ever, where influence can be wielded through screens and keyboards as effectively as through physical presence. The weak man of our era is overwhelmed by this complexity. He retreats into simplistic thinking, reactionary behavior, and emotional decision-making. He becomes a victim of the very systems he should be mastering, manipulated by forces he doesn't understand, controlled by algorithms he can't see. He surrenders his agency bit by bit until he is little more than a consumer of other people's content and a reactor to other people's initiatives. But, for the man who chooses the path of transformation, who commits himself to the systematic development of silence, strategy, and precision, the modern world offers unprecedented opportunities. The very complexity that overwhelms the weak creates camouflage for the strong. The information overload that paralyzes the masses provides cover for those who know how to move beneath the surface. The constant noise and distraction create a perfect environment for those who have learned to think clearly and act decisively. The dangerous man recognizes that in every crisis lies opportunity, in every challenge lies the chance for advantage, in every moment of chaos lies the possibility for those who remain calm to gain ground while others lose their footing. He does not fear uncertainty because he has made himself adaptable. He does not fear change because he has learned to anticipate and prepare for it. He does not fear opposition because he has eliminated the weaknesses that opposition could exploit. This transformation is not a destination but a continuous process of refinement and evolution. The dangerous man never stops learning, never stops improving, never stops adapting his methods to new circumstances. He maintains a constant vigilance over his own development, always seeking to identify and eliminate any new weaknesses that might emerge, always looking for ways to enhance his strategic position, always refining his precision to an ever-sharper edge. The rewards of this path extend far beyond mere personal advancement or material success. The dangerous man achieves something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom from the need for others' approval, freedom from emotional reactivity, freedom from the chaos and confusion that plague those who have not learned to master themselves. He moves through the world with quiet confidence, knowing that he has made himself impervious to the forces that destroy other men. This is the promise and the challenge of the dangerous man's code, the complete transformation of the self from vulnerable to invulnerable, from reactive to proactive, from weak to dangerous. It is a path that demands everything and promises everything in return. For the man who has the courage to destroy his weak self and rebuild himself according to these principles, the world becomes not a threatening place to be endured but a chessboard to be mastered. Part 1: The Architecture of Silence. The first principle of the dangerous man's transformation begins with understanding that silence is not merely the absence of sound but the presence of power. In a world where every thought is immediately vocalized, every emotion instantly shared, and every opinion broadcasted to anyone who will listen, the man who has mastered strategic silence operates with an advantage so profound that others cannot even perceive it, much less counter it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Personal Reflections that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The dangerous man extends this wisdom: the best strategy is not to reveal your strategy. While others exhaust themselves in constant communication, revealing their intentions, their fears, their weaknesses, and their plans, the dangerous man creates a mystery around himself that draws people in while keeping his true nature hidden. This strategic silence begins with the recognition that every word spoken is a piece of intelligence given to potential competitors, enemies, or manipulators. In the corporate boardroom, the executive who speaks last and speaks least often holds the most sway, not because his words are more eloquent, but because he has heard everyone else's position, understood their motivations, and can craft his response to maximum effect. The others have revealed themselves, he remains hidden until the moment he chooses to strike. Consider the dynamics of any negotiation. The party that speaks first, that fills uncomfortable pauses with nervous chatter, that feels compelled to explain and justify and elaborate, invariably finds themselves at a disadvantage. They have revealed their price point, their timeline, their level of desperation or desire. Meanwhile, the negotiator who has learned to use silence as a tool watches and listens, gathering information while revealing nothing, creating pressure through absence rather than presence. The dangerous man learns to become comfortable with silence in all its forms. He does not rush to fill conversational pauses because he understands that silence makes others uncomfortable and that uncomfortable people reveal more than they intend. He does not feel compelled to defend himself against every criticism or accusation because he knows that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. He does not broadcast his successes because he understands that visible success creates enemies while hidden success accumulates compound advantages. But strategic silence is not simply about refusing to speak. It is about creating a deliberate mystery that serves specific purposes. The dangerous man reveals just enough of himself to be intriguing but not enough to be predictable. He shares information that serves his strategic interests while withholding information that could be used against him. He creates an aura of competence and capability without revealing the specific sources of his power. This calibrated revelation requires enormous self-discipline. The weak man is driven by ego to share his achievements, by insecurity to explain his actions, by loneliness to reveal his thoughts. He cannot bear to be misunderstood, underestimated, or ignored. He would rather be known and vulnerable than unknown and protected. The dangerous man has destroyed this weakness within himself. He would rather be effective than understood, powerful than popular, strategically positioned than emotionally satisfied. The practical applications of strategic silence extend into every aspect of life. In professional settings, the man who speaks less but acts more effectively builds a reputation for competence and reliability. His colleagues begin to wait for his input, to value his contributions more highly because they are rare and typically valuable. He is not seen as someone who talks a good game but as someone who delivers results. In personal relationships, strategic silence creates depth and intrigue. While others overshare and become predictable, the man who reveals himself gradually and selectively maintains an air of mystery that keeps people engaged and interested. He does not pour out his emotional state at every opportunity but chooses his moments of vulnerability carefully, making them more meaningful when they occur. In adversarial situations, silence can be the most devastating weapon available. The person who is trying to provoke a reaction, to goad you into saying or doing something foolish, is disarmed when met with calm, strategic silence. They exhaust themselves against your non-response while you gather intelligence about their methods, their triggers, and their weaknesses. The dangerous man also understands that silence creates space for others to fill with their own projections and assumptions. People will assume competence, wisdom, depth, and power in the absence of evidence to the contrary. They will project their own hopes, fears, and desires onto the silent figure, often creating a more powerful image than any amount of self-promotion could achieve. The wise man allows others to tell themselves stories about him rather than trying to control the narrative through constant communication. This principle extends to the digital age, where the temptation to share, comment, post, and respond is constant and overwhelming. The dangerous man of the modern era understands that every digital footprint is a piece of intelligence that can be analyzed, every post is a position that can be attacked, every share is a revelation of values and priorities that can be exploited. He maintains his strategic silence even in virtual spaces, understanding that what he does not post can be more powerful than what he does. The development of strategic silence requires the systematic elimination of several deep-seated psychological drives.
The need for validation must be replaced by internal certainty. The desire for connection must be balanced against the necessity for protection. The impulse to explain and justify must be controlled by strategic thinking. The ego's demand for recognition must be subordinated to the long-term advantages of remaining partially hidden. This transformation begins with small practices that build the psychological muscles necessary for strategic silence. Learning to count to 10 before responding in heated conversations. Practicing comfortable silence in social situations. Resisting the urge to correct every misconception or respond to every provocation. These seemingly minor disciplines create the foundation for more significant applications of strategic silence in high-stakes situations. The dangerous man also learns to distinguish between different types of silence. There is the silence of weakness, the inability to speak up when action is required, the failure to defend important principles, the retreat from necessary confrontation. This is not strategic silence but cowardice, and it serves no useful purpose in the dangerous man's development. Strategic silence is an active choice, a deliberate decision made from a position of strength and confidence. Then, there is the silence of observation, the disciplined attention that allows the dangerous man to see what others miss, to understand the real dynamics at play beneath the surface conversations, to identify opportunities and threats that escape the notice of those who are too busy talking to truly listen. This observational silence is perhaps the most valuable form because it provides the raw intelligence upon which all strategy is based. Finally, there is the silence of preparation, the quiet periods during which the dangerous man develops his capabilities, refines his strategies, and positions himself for future action. While others are broadcasting their intentions and activities, he is building strength in secret, creating advantages that will become apparent only when he chooses to reveal them. The mastery of strategic silence also requires understanding its limits and knowing when to break it. The dangerous man does not remain silent when action is required, when leadership is needed, or when strategic communication would advance his position. He breaks his silence for calculated reasons at calculated moments, making his words more powerful because they are rare and his actions more impactful because they are unexpected. When the dangerous man does speak, his words carry weight precisely because they have been carefully considered and strategically timed. He does not waste words on empty pleasantries or meaningless observations. Every statement serves a purpose, advances an objective, or tests a hypothesis. His communication becomes a precision instrument rather than a way to pass time or fill silence. The psychological effect of this transformation is profound. The man who has learned to use strategic silence discovers that he no longer needs constant external validation because he has developed internal certainty. He no longer fears being misunderstood because he is more concerned with being effective than being liked. He no longer feels compelled to explain himself because he is confident in his choices and comfortable with allowing others to draw their own conclusions. This internal shift creates external power. Others begin to seek his approval rather than him seeking theirs. They begin to value his attention because it is not freely given. They begin to respect his judgment because it is not casually offered. The strategic use of silence transforms the dangerous man from someone who needs things from others into someone whom others need, a fundamental shift in the balance of power that affects every interaction and relationship. But, perhaps the most important aspect of strategic silence is how it creates space for strategic thinking. The man who is constantly talking, constantly reacting, constantly responding to external stimuli has no mental space left for careful analysis, long-term planning, or deep consideration of complex problems. Strategic silence creates the psychological space necessary for the kind of thinking that leads to real advantages. In this space of silence, the dangerous man can observe patterns that others miss, can think several moves ahead while others are still reacting to the current situation, can develop innovative solutions while others are recycling conventional wisdom. The silence becomes not just a tool for managing external relationships but a laboratory for developing internal capabilities. The dangerous man of the modern era faces particular challenges in maintaining strategic silence. The speed of communication, the expectation of instant response, the cultural pressure to share and engage constantly all work against the disciplined practice of strategic silence. Yet these very challenges make the skill more valuable than ever before. In a world where everyone is shouting, the person who whispers commands attention. In an environment of information overload,
the person who shares selectively becomes more interesting than those who share everything. The development of strategic silence is not a technique to be applied occasionally but a fundamental rewiring of one's relationship with communication itself. It requires seeing every interaction as a strategic opportunity, every conversation as a form of intelligence gathering, every moment of silence as a chance to gain advantage through observation and consideration rather than reaction and response. For the man committed to this transformation, strategic silence becomes as natural as breathing, as automatic as thinking. He no longer has to consciously decide when to be quiet because the strategic mindset has become his default mode of operation. He naturally gravitates toward positions where he can observe rather than perform, where he can gather intelligence rather than provide it, where he can maintain his mystery rather than resolve it. This mastery of strategic silence creates the foundation for all other aspects of the dangerous man's development. Without the ability to control his communication and maintain his strategic position, no amount of planning or precision can protect him from the consequences of revealed weaknesses or disclosed strategies. Strategic silence is both the first principle and the underlying condition that makes all other principles possible. The man who has truly mastered strategic silence discovers that he has gained something more valuable than any tactical advantage. He has gained control over his own image and narrative. Rather than being defined by others' perceptions or reactions, he becomes the author of his own mystery, the architect of his own reputation, the designer of his own strategic position. In a world where most people are open books, the dangerous man has become a cipher, and in that mystery lies enormous power. Part 2, The Mathematics of Strategy. The second pillar of the dangerous man's transformation lies in the development of strategic thinking as a fundamental operating system rather than an occasional tool. Where the weak man reacts to circumstances as they arise, driven by emotion, impulse, and the illusion of urgency, the dangerous man operates from a different paradigm entirely. He sees time not as a series of disconnected moments but as a chessboard stretching infinitely in all directions, where every move creates consequences that ripple forward and backward, affecting not just the immediate situation but the entire framework within which future decisions will be made. Strategic thinking is not simply planning ahead. Any fool can make plans. Strategic thinking is the systematic cultivation of perspective that allows a man to see patterns where others see chaos, to identify leverage points where others see only obstacles, and to understand the true nature of any situation by examining its underlying structure rather than its surface appearance. The dangerous man learns to think in systems rather than events, in processes rather than outcomes, in probabilities rather than certainties. This transformation begins with the recognition that every situation, no matter how simple it appears on the surface, is actually part of multiple interconnected systems operating simultaneously. A conversation with a colleague is not just an exchange of information but a positioning move in the office hierarchy, a test of alliance systems, a data-gathering opportunity, and a chance to influence future decision-making processes. A financial decision is not just about the immediate cost and benefit but about opportunity costs, signal effects, strategic positioning, and the creation or destruction of future options. The weak man sees only the immediate layer of any situation and, therefore, makes decisions that solve today's problem while creating tomorrow's crisis. He optimizes for short-term comfort at the expense of long-term positioning. He reacts to symptoms while ignoring causes. He treats effects while the underlying dynamics continue to generate new problems. The dangerous man, by contrast, has trained himself to see through the surface layer to the underlying mechanics that actually drive outcomes. This systematic perspective requires the development of what military strategists call operational thinking, the ability to connect tactical actions to strategic objectives through a clear understanding of the intermediate steps required to transform current reality into desired future states. The dangerous man does not simply want things, he understands the causal chains that must be activated to achieve them. He does not simply react to problems, he traces them back to their sources and addresses root causes rather than symptoms. Consider the difference in how a strategic thinker approaches a professional conflict compared to someone operating from a reactive mindset. The reactive person sees the conflict as a discrete event to be won or lost through immediate tactics, arguing more forcefully, gathering allies for the current battle, trying to prove who is right or wrong in the specific disagreement. The strategic thinker sees the same conflict as one move in a much larger game. He asks different questions. What does this conflict reveal about underlying power dynamics?
How can this situation be used to gather intelligence about other players' priorities and methods? What precedent will different responses set for future interactions? How can this apparent setback be converted into strategic advantage? The strategic thinker might actually lose the immediate battle in order to win the larger war. He might allow his opponent to appear victorious while positioning himself for future moves that his opponent cannot see coming. He might use the conflict as a way to test alliance systems, to reveal hidden agendas, or to create obligations that can be called in later. While his opponent celebrates a tactical victory, the strategic thinker is already 3 moves ahead, setting up conditions for a much more significant future advantage. This approach requires enormous emotional discipline because it often means accepting short-term losses, misunderstandings, or apparent defeats in service of longer-term positioning. The ego wants immediate vindication, immediate victory, immediate recognition. The strategic mind subordinates these desires to larger objectives. The dangerous man has learned to derive satisfaction not from winning individual battles but from advancing his overall strategic position, even when that advance is invisible to others. The development of strategic thinking also requires understanding the concept of optionality, the creation and preservation of future choices rather than the immediate exercise of current capabilities. The weak man, when he gains power or resources, tends to use them immediately for maximum visible impact. The strategic thinker accumulates options and preserves them until the optimal moment for deployment. He understands that unused power is often more influential than exercised power because it contains infinite potential rather than finite results. This principle applies across all domains of life. In financial matters, the strategic thinker maintains reserves not just for emergencies but for opportunities. He understands that cash is not just a store of value but a strategic option that allows him to act when others cannot. In relationships, he cultivates connections not for immediate benefit but to create a network of potential future alliances. In career development, he acquires skills and knowledge not for current applications but to position himself for opportunities that may not yet exist. The dangerous man learns to think in portfolios rather than individual bets. Just as a sophisticated investor diversifies across assets, time horizons, and risk levels, the strategic thinker diversifies his investments of time, energy, and resources across multiple potential futures. He does not put all his efforts into one path but maintains several parallel development tracks, allowing him to pivot quickly when circumstances change without losing momentum. This diversified approach requires constant environmental scanning, the systematic monitoring of trends, patterns, and weak signals that might indicate coming changes in the landscape. The dangerous man develops sources of information across multiple domains and industries, creating an intelligence network that helps him see changes coming before they become obvious to others. He reads not just in his immediate field of interest but across disciplines, understanding that innovation often comes from the intersection of previously unconnected domains. The strategic thinker also understands timing in a way that reactive people do not. He knows that the same action taken at different moments can produce completely different results. A piece of information shared too early might be dismissed or forgotten, shared too late, it might be irrelevant. An opportunity pursued prematurely might fail for lack of supporting conditions, pursued too late, it might be captured by competitors. The dangerous man develops an intuitive sense for the rhythm of different types of processes and learns to synchronize his actions with the natural timing of the systems he operates within. This sensitivity to timing is complemented by an understanding of leverage, the identification of points where small actions can produce disproportionately large results. The strategic thinker is always looking for the minimum viable intervention that can shift an entire system in his desired direction. Rather than applying brute force, he looks for the subtle pressures that can cause existing tensions to resolve in his favor. Rather than fighting against momentum, he identifies ways to redirect it toward his objectives. The concept of leverage extends to understanding influence systems within organizations and social groups. The dangerous man maps these systems carefully, identifying who really makes decisions, as opposed to who officially makes them, who influences the decision makers, and what factors actually drive choices, as opposed to the stated criteria. He invests his time and energy in building relationships with the people who have real influence rather than wasting effort on those who merely have titles or official authority. Strategic thinking also requires the ability to think in probabilities rather than certainties. The weak man wants guarantees and becomes paralyzed when they are not available. The strategic thinker understands that all decisions are made under uncertainty and develops frameworks for making good decisions with incomplete information. He learns to calibrate his confidence levels, to update his assessments as new information becomes available, and to position himself to benefit regardless of which of several possible futures actually materializes. This probabilistic thinking is especially important in competitive situations where other intelligent actors are also making strategic decisions. The dangerous man learns to think not just about what he wants to accomplish but about how his opponents will react to his moves and how those reactions will create new opportunities and constraints. He develops the ability to think several moves ahead while remaining flexible enough to adapt when the actual sequence of events differs from his predictions. Game theory becomes a practical tool rather than an abstract concept. The strategic thinker analyzes situations to understand the payoff structures for all parties involved, identifies opportunities for positive-sum solutions where possible, and positions himself advantageously in zero-sum competitions when necessary. He understands when cooperation serves his interests and when competition is unavoidable, and he adjusts his approach accordingly rather than being driven by emotional preferences for one mode or the other. The dangerous man also learns to distinguish between different types of games and to choose carefully which games to play. Some competitions are worth winning, others are better avoided entirely. Some battles are necessary for strategic reasons, others are distractions that consume resources without advancing objectives. The strategic thinker becomes highly selective about where to invest his competitive energies, understanding that every engagement has opportunity costs and that victory in the wrong competition can be worse than never competing at all. This selectivity extends to understanding the difference between playing the game and changing the game. While others compete within existing frameworks, the strategic thinker sometimes finds it more effective to alter the rules, redefine the competition, or create entirely new games where his advantages are more pronounced. He doesn't simply try to get better at doing what everyone else is doing, he looks for ways to make what everyone else is doing irrelevant. The development of strategic thinking requires extensive study of successful strategists across history and domains. The dangerous man learns from military leaders who understood terrain and timing, from business leaders who built lasting competitive advantages, from political figures who navigated complex alliance systems, from scientific innovators who saw possibilities that others missed. He distills principles from these diverse fields and adapts them to his own circumstances and objectives. But theoretical knowledge alone is insufficient. Strategic thinking must be practiced and refined through application in real situations with real consequences. The dangerous man seeks out opportunities to exercise strategic thinking in low-stakes environments before applying it in situations where mistakes would be costly. He treats every interaction, every project, every challenge as a chance to practice seeing systems, thinking in probabilities, considering multiple moves ahead, and identifying leverage points. This practice develops what can only be called strategic intuition, the ability to rapidly assess complex situations and identify the most promising approaches without conscious analysis. Like a chess master who can glance at a board position and immediately see the strongest moves, the dangerous man develops an almost automatic ability to perceive strategic opportunities and threats. This intuition is not mystical but the result of extensive pattern recognition developed through deliberate practice and careful analysis of results. The strategic mindset also transforms how the dangerous man handles information. Rather than simply consuming information passively, he actively seeks intelligence that will improve his strategic position. He develops sources, asks probing questions, and looks for the information that others are not seeing or not sharing. He understands that in any strategic situation, the side with better intelligence has a significant advantage, and he invests accordingly in developing his information-gathering capabilities. Equally important is information security, understanding what information he possesses that would be valuable to competitors and ensuring that it is protected accordingly. The strategic thinker operates on a need-to-know basis even with allies, sharing information that advances mutual interests while protecting intelligence that provides him with unique advantages. He understands that information shared carelessly becomes a weapon in the hands of future opponents.
The dangerous man learns to create strategic narratives, not lies or deceptions, but carefully crafted presentations of reality that influence how others understand situations and make decisions. He understands that facts alone do not determine outcomes. The interpretation and presentation of facts can be just as important as the facts themselves. By controlling the narrative framework within which decisions are made, he can influence those decisions without resorting to direct manipulation or coercion. This narrative control extends to his own reputation and image. Rather than leaving his reputation to chance or to others' interpretations, the strategic thinker carefully crafts and maintains the image that best serves his long-term objectives. He understands that reputation is a strategic asset that must be actively managed, and he makes decisions about what to reveal, what to emphasize, and what to downplay based on strategic considerations rather than immediate emotional impulses. The transformation from reactive to strategic thinking is perhaps the most difficult aspect of becoming a dangerous man because it requires rewiring fundamental mental habits that have been reinforced over years or decades. The reactive mind wants immediate answers, quick fixes, and simple solutions. The strategic mind embraces complexity, tolerates ambiguity, and works patiently toward long-term objectives even when the path is unclear. This transformation is also psychologically challenging because strategic thinking often requires making decisions that appear suboptimal in the short term. The strategic thinker might take a lower-paying job that offers better learning opportunities, might allow a competitor to claim credit for an idea in order to maintain strategic relationships, might invest resources in capabilities that won't pay off for years. These decisions require enormous faith in one's own analysis and the discipline to persist when others question the wisdom of the approach. But, for the man who successfully makes this transformation, the rewards are extraordinary. He discovers that he can navigate complex situations that paralyze others, can identify opportunities that others miss, and can position himself advantageously even in apparently disadvantageous circumstances. He develops a sense of agency and control that comes from understanding the deeper mechanics of how things actually work rather than being buffeted by surface events. The strategic thinker also finds that his stress levels decrease dramatically because he is no longer caught off guard by predictable developments. By thinking through multiple scenarios in advance, he has prepared responses for various contingencies and can remain calm when others are panicking. His confidence comes not from believing that everything will go according to plan but from knowing that he can adapt and respond effectively regardless of what actually happens. This strategic mindset becomes the foundation for all other aspects of the dangerous man's development. Without the ability to think systematically about complex situations, to plan multiple moves ahead, and to position oneself advantageously within competitive systems, no amount of tactical skill or individual capability can provide lasting security or advancement. Strategic thinking is the operating system that allows all other capabilities to function effectively and that ensures that individual strengths are deployed in ways that create compound advantages rather than isolated victories. The dangerous man of the modern era must be an even more sophisticated strategic thinker than his historical predecessors because the pace of change has accelerated, the complexity of systems has increased, and the number of variables that must be considered has multiplied exponentially. Yet the fundamental principles remain unchanged: see systems rather than events, think in probabilities rather than certainties, create options rather than simply exercising current capabilities, understand timing and leverage, and always consider how your opponents will react to your moves. For the man who masters these principles, strategy becomes not just a tool for achieving specific objectives but a way of moving through the world with confidence and effectiveness. He becomes someone who shapes events rather than being shaped by them, who creates opportunities rather than simply waiting for them to appear, who influences outcomes through systematic thinking rather than hoping for lucky breaks. The strategic thinker ultimately achieves a form of practical wisdom that allows him to navigate any situation, in any domain, with a reasonable expectation of favorable outcomes. This wisdom is not mystical or intuitive but the result of disciplined thinking, careful observation, and systematic analysis applied consistently over time. It is available to any man with the patience to develop it and the discipline to apply it, but it comes only to those who are willing to abandon the comfortable illusions of reactive thinking and embrace the more demanding but far more effective discipline of strategic thought. Part 3: The calibration of precision. The final element in the dangerous man's transformation is perhaps the most challenging to master because it requires the complete elimination of waste from every aspect of one's existence. Precision is not merely accuracy in specific tasks but a fundamental approach to life that treats every resource, time, energy, attention, words, emotions, and actions as finite and, therefore, precious. The dangerous man learns to operate with the efficiency of a master craftsman, where nothing is superfluous, everything serves a purpose, and every element is calibrated to produce maximum effect with minimum expenditure. This precision begins with the recognition that most human activity is fundamentally wasteful. People spend enormous amounts of energy on tasks that produce no lasting value, engage in conversations that advance no meaningful objectives, and make decisions based on incomplete analysis or emotional reactions rather than systematic evaluation. They scatter their attention across dozens of minor concerns while failing to focus adequately on the few things that actually matter. They react to urgent distractions while ignoring important priorities. They optimize for comfort and convenience rather than effectiveness and results. The dangerous man subjects every aspect of his life to systematic analysis and continuous optimization. He asks not "what am I doing," but "why am I doing this?" Not "how do I feel about this," but "what result am I trying to achieve, and is this the most effective way to achieve it?" Not "what do I want to do," but "what needs to be done, and how can I do it with maximum efficiency?" This analysis begins with time allocation because time is the only truly non-renewable resource. The dangerous man tracks how he actually spends his time, not how he thinks he spends it or how he intends to spend it, but how it is actually allocated across different activities and priorities. This tracking reveals patterns that are often surprising and sometimes alarming: hours lost to meaningless activities, energy dissipated on trivial concerns, attention fragmented across too many simultaneous focuses. Armed with this data, the dangerous man begins the systematic elimination of time waste. Activities that produce no measurable benefit toward his strategic objectives are reduced or eliminated entirely. Commitments that serve others' priorities at the expense of his own are carefully evaluated and, where possible, declined or renegotiated. Social obligations that provide neither genuine enjoyment nor strategic advantage are minimized. The goal is not to become antisocial or purely utilitarian but to ensure that every significant time investment serves a clear purpose. But time management is only the beginning. The dangerous man extends this precision to his decision-making processes, developing systematic frameworks for evaluating choices rather than relying on intuition, emotion, or conventional wisdom. He learns to quantify intangible factors, to consider opportunity costs alongside direct costs, to evaluate long-term consequences alongside immediate benefits. His decisions become more accurate not because he has access to better information but because he has better systems for processing the information available to him. This systematic approach to decision-making requires the development of clear criteria for evaluating options. The dangerous man defines his core values and strategic objectives explicitly rather than leaving them as vague aspirations, and he uses these definitions as filters for eliminating options that do not align with his fundamental priorities. He develops decision trees for common types of choices, allowing him to move quickly through routine decisions while reserving his mental energy for more complex evaluations. The precision extends to communication, where every word is chosen for maximum impact. The dangerous man eliminates filler words, unnecessary qualifications, and redundant explanations from his speech. He learns to say exactly what he means in the fewest words necessary to achieve understanding and compliance. His emails become shorter but more effective, his presentations become more focused but more persuasive, his conversations become more purposeful but more influential. This communication precision is not about being curt or cold but about respecting both his own time and his audience's attention. By eliminating waste from his communication, he makes his actual message more powerful and memorable. People begin to listen more carefully when he speaks because they know that every word has been chosen deliberately. His reputation for precision in communication enhances his reputation for precision in thinking and action. The dangerous man also develops precision in his physical environment, understanding that external disorder creates internal inefficiency. His workspace is organized to minimize time spent searching for materials, his home is arranged to eliminate unnecessary decisions about routine tasks, his possessions are curated to include only items that serve clear purposes. This is not obsessive minimalism but strategic optimization, removing friction from his daily operations so that his mental energy can be focused on high-value activities.
Financial precision becomes another crucial element of this transformation. The dangerous man tracks his financial flows with the same attention to detail that a business tracks its cash flows. He understands exactly where his money goes, what returns he receives on different types of investments, and what financial positions best support his strategic objectives. His spending becomes intentional rather than impulsive, his investments become systematic rather than speculative, his financial position becomes a tool for creating opportunities rather than simply a buffer against problems. This financial precision extends to understanding the true costs of different lifestyle choices, career paths, and strategic decisions. The dangerous man learns to calculate not just the monetary costs but the opportunity costs, the time costs, the energy costs, and the strategic positioning costs of different alternatives. This comprehensive cost analysis allows him to make decisions that optimize across multiple dimensions simultaneously rather than optimizing for one factor while inadvertently creating costs in other areas. Physical precision becomes equally important as the dangerous man recognizes that his body is the platform from which all other activities are launched. He develops systematic approaches to nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress management that optimize his energy levels, cognitive performance, and long-term health. This is not about achieving perfect fitness but about maintaining the physical capacity to execute his strategic plans over extended periods without being limited by preventable health problems or energy fluctuations. The dangerous man learns to monitor his physical and mental states with the same attention that a professional athlete monitors performance metrics. He identifies the conditions that produce peak performance and systematically creates those conditions more frequently. He recognizes the warning signs of burnout, illness, or decreased effectiveness and takes corrective action before these conditions can compromise his strategic position. Mental precision perhaps requires the most sophisticated development because it involves training the mind to operate with the same systematic efficiency that characterizes the dangerous man's external activities. This includes developing focus techniques that allow him to give complete attention to single tasks rather than operating in a constant state of partial attention to multiple concerns. It includes learning to think in structured ways that produce clearer analysis and better decisions. It includes developing emotional regulation techniques that prevent feelings from interfering with judgment. The dangerous man learns to distinguish between different types of mental activities and to allocate his cognitive resources accordingly. Routine decisions are handled through established protocols that require minimal mental energy. Creative thinking is scheduled during periods when his mind is most fresh and focused. Complex analysis is broken down into systematic processes that ensure thoroughness while preventing overwhelm. Strategic planning is conducted during dedicated time blocks when he can think without interruption about long-term positioning and objectives. This mental precision also involves learning to say no to cognitive distractions and information overload. The dangerous man becomes highly selective about his information diet, focusing on sources that provide actionable intelligence rather than consuming news and entertainment that provide emotional stimulation without practical value. He develops filters that help him identify the small percentage of information that actually requires his attention while ignoring the vast majority of available content that would simply create noise in his decision-making processes. Emotional precision represents perhaps the most advanced aspect of this development because it requires the dangerous man to maintain conscious control over his emotional responses while still allowing emotions to provide valuable information about situations and relationships. This is not about suppressing emotions but about ensuring that emotional responses serve strategic objectives rather than undermining them. The dangerous man learns to recognize his emotional patterns and triggers, understanding how different situations and people affect his mental state and decision-making capacity. He develops techniques for managing his emotional responses in real time, allowing him to remain calm and focused even in high-pressure or adversarial situations. He learns to use emotions as intelligence about other people's motivations and likely actions while preventing his own emotions from creating vulnerabilities that others can exploit. This emotional precision also involves calibrating his emotional investments to align with strategic priorities. The dangerous man does not waste emotional energy on situations he cannot control or people who do not reciprocate his investment.
He learns to care deeply about things that matter while maintaining psychological distance from things that do not serve his larger objectives. This emotional discipline allows him to maintain relationships and commitments over long periods without burning out or becoming cynical. The development of precision requires constant measurement and feedback because it is impossible to optimize what cannot be measured. The dangerous man develops metrics for tracking his performance across different domains: productivity metrics, financial metrics, health metrics, relationship metrics, and strategic positioning metrics. These measurements are not ends in themselves but tools for identifying areas where precision can be improved and for verifying that optimization efforts are producing actual results. This measurement discipline extends to regular review and adjustment processes where the dangerous man evaluates his systems and approaches, identifies what is working and what is not, and makes systematic improvements. He treats his own development as an engineering problem, applying systematic analysis and continuous improvement techniques to enhance his effectiveness over time. The precision principle also requires understanding the difference between perfectionism and optimization. Perfectionism is often a form of procrastination or insecurity disguised as high standards, the pursuit of impossible standards that prevent completion and action. Optimization is about finding the level of quality and effort that produces the best results given available resources and constraints. The dangerous man learns to identify the point of diminishing returns where additional effort produces minimal additional benefit, and he stops at that point rather than pursuing marginal improvements at excessive cost. This distinction becomes particularly important in competitive situations where perfect solutions are not available and decisions must be made with incomplete information under time pressure. The dangerous man develops the ability to produce high-quality work quickly rather than perfect work slowly, understanding that in most situations, a very good solution implemented immediately is superior to a perfect solution that arrives too late to influence outcomes. Precision in relationships requires perhaps the most delicate calibration because it involves balancing strategic considerations with genuine human connection. The dangerous man learns to invest appropriately in relationships that serve mutual interests while protecting himself from relationships that are purely extractive. He becomes skilled at reading people's motivations and adjusting his level of openness and investment accordingly. This relationship precision is not about manipulation or treating people as mere tools but about ensuring that his social investments produce genuine value for all parties involved. He learns to be generous with people who reciprocate generosity while being appropriately guarded with people who take advantage of openness. He develops the ability to maintain professional relationships with people he does not particularly like while deepening personal relationships with people who share his values and complement his objectives. The dangerous man also learns to calibrate his influence tactics to different people and situations, understanding that the same approach that works effectively with one person might be counterproductive with another. He develops a repertoire of influence techniques and learns to select the approach that is most likely to produce the desired outcome with each specific individual in each specific context. Precision in learning becomes another crucial capability as the dangerous man recognizes that his competitive advantage depends on continuously developing new knowledge and skills faster than his environment changes. He learns to identify the specific knowledge and capabilities that will provide strategic advantages in his chosen domains, and he develops systematic approaches for acquiring these capabilities efficiently. This learning precision involves distinguishing between different types of knowledge and allocating his educational efforts accordingly. Some knowledge needs to be mastered deeply and retained permanently because it forms the foundation for advanced capabilities. Other knowledge needs only to be understood well enough to make informed decisions or to communicate effectively with experts. Still, other knowledge needs only to be identified and cataloged so that it can be accessed when needed rather than carried in active memory. The dangerous man also learns to identify the most efficient methods for acquiring different types of knowledge and skills, understanding that traditional educational approaches are often suboptimal for adult learners with specific objectives. He develops relationships with mentors and experts who can accelerate his learning, creates practice opportunities that allow him to test and refine new capabilities, and designs feedback systems that help him identify and correct deficiencies quickly. As the dangerous man masters these various forms of precision, he begins to experience what can only be described as flow in his daily operations. His life becomes increasingly efficient and effective, with less wasted motion, fewer mistakes, and more consistent results. He develops a sense of confidence that comes not from believing everything will go perfectly but from knowing that he can handle whatever situations arise with systematic competence. This operational flow creates compound advantages over time as the dangerous man's superior efficiency allows him to accomplish more with the same resources, to maintain higher quality standards without proportional increases in effort, and to remain calm and focused while others become overwhelmed by complexity or pressure. His reputation for reliability and effectiveness begins to attract opportunities and allies while deterring potential opponents who recognize that competing with him will be costly and difficult. The precision principle ultimately transforms the dangerous man into something like a human performance machine, not cold or mechanical, but optimized for effectiveness across all dimensions of operation. He becomes someone who can be counted on to deliver results, to maintain standards under pressure, to make good decisions quickly, and to continuously improve his capabilities over time. This transformation is complete when precision becomes so deeply ingrained that it operates automatically, without conscious effort or constant vigilance. The dangerous man no longer has to think about eliminating waste or optimizing performance because these behaviors have become his natural mode of operation. He has internalized the discipline of precision to the point where it shapes every action, every decision, and every response without creating stress or rigidity. At this point, the dangerous man has achieved the integration of all three principles: silence, strategy, and precision into a unified approach to life that makes him genuinely formidable. He operates with systematic effectiveness, strategic awareness, and disciplined efficiency while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances and the wisdom to know when rules should be broken in service of larger objectives. The man who has destroyed his weak self through the systematic application of these principles becomes truly invulnerable to external manipulation or control. His strategic silence prevents others from gaining intelligence that could be used against him. His strategic thinking allows him to anticipate and counter threats before they materialize. His systematic precision ensures that he can execute his strategies effectively and consistently. More importantly, he has achieved a kind of freedom that few people ever experience: freedom from the chaos and inefficiency that characterize most people's lives, freedom from the emotional reactivity that makes most people predictable and controllable, freedom from the strategic blindness that leaves most people vulnerable to forces they do not understand. This freedom allows the dangerous man to operate from choice rather than compulsion, from strategy rather than reaction, from strength rather than weakness. He becomes the author of his own destiny not through the exercise of supernatural powers but through the systematic application of principles that, while demanding to implement, are available to anyone with the discipline and commitment to pursue them. The dangerous man's code of silence, strategy, precision is ultimately a code of liberation. It offers a path from vulnerability to invulnerability, from weakness to strength, from reaction to action. But it is a path that demands everything and gives everything in return, a transformation so complete that the man who emerges bears little resemblance to the man who began the journey. For those with the courage to undertake this transformation, the rewards are unlimited. For those who lack this courage, the principles serve as a reminder of what becomes possible when a man commits himself completely to the systematic destruction of his weak self and the creation of something stronger, more capable, and ultimately more dangerous than what existed before.